Now that we talked about in the video law and grace, that law and grace are not opposed. They're not fighting against one another in any way. They work together. That the word law in Hebrew is Torah, and that means instruction. Now we know those things. Now we talked about that issue. Let's talk about whether the law is for us today in our times. And so we're going to go straight to Matthew 5, and we're going to talk about Matthew 5:17 through 19. And we're going to see that passage because that passage is used so many times against us and against the law being valid today. So let's go with 5:17. It says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish these things, but to fulfill them." Okay, so he said he's not come to abolish. And he's not done that because he's come to fulfill them. And many people, that word pledo in Greek, many people use that and say, oh, yeah, he didn't abolish them, but he fulfilled them, and so now they're gone, which is pretty much the same thing. So what does fulfill them really mean? So let's go to 18 and 19 so that we can see a little bit, and then we'll come back to that definition, the definition of that word. 18 says, "I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth pass away." Okay, question. Heaven and earth have passed away? No. So it says, "I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke of a letter will pass from the law until everything takes place." What are you talking about everything taking place? We're not talking about when Jesus died or came to live a perfect life and died and rose again, was raised again, and then ascended into heaven. We're not talking about, that's not everything taking place. We're talking about once the earth and the heaven and earth pass away. So we're talking about the end of all things. So we're not talking about nowadays. So not a letter, not the smallest letter or the stroke of a letter is going to pass away from the law. It's going to be there. And then 19 says, "So anyone who breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches others to do so will be called least in the kingdom of heaven." Okay, question is, has the kingdom started? Is the kingdom here? Did Christ go to heaven to reign? No, he didn't go to heaven to reign. He's at the right hand of his Father. And he said that he's going to come back to reign. So the kingdom's not here yet. And so it says, anyone who breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches others to do so will be called least in the kingdom of heaven, which is later on. Later on. But whoever obeys them and teaches others to do so will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So when Christ comes to reign again, has to do with our responsibilities. What responsibilities will we have? Like he talks about in many parables. So he says, first, that he's not come to abolish. And he says, until heaven and earth pass away, and that's not come about. And he says, anyone who breaks one of the least of the commands and teaches others to do so will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And we know that the kingdom has not started, or his kingdom has not started yet. So we have three things there within this passage that are saying that it's not gone, that the law is for today. And so what does fulfill them mean? What did Christ come to do? He didn't come to do away with the law. In fact, he came to teach the real meaning of the instructions, because in that time they were messed up in their interpretation of what the instructions were. And so he's come to fulfill them. He came to do or obey every command that he was supposed to obey. Unlike us, which we cannot obey completely, he came to fulfill all of them, to obey all of them. And then he also came to fulfill the prophecy that was about him. He didn't fulfill all the prophecy that was about him because there's prophecy about him coming back. So he came to fulfill everything that was during that time. But he didn't come to abolish. He didn't come to do away with. So we see that Jesus is saying, he's not saying that it's gone. That it is for today. Because whoever breaks one of the least of the commands and teaches others to do so will be the least in the kingdom of heaven. So what does that mean? That it is for us. Now, let's remember that we are not saved by works. There's not enough works that someone can do, and that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that at all, because it's by grace, through faith, that we can be saved. And that's the only way that salvation comes. So, the law is, the instructions are to obey, and that's how we prove that we really know him. If you know me, you will obey my commands. And it also talks about us, how we are deceived. How will they know that we're his disciples? If we love one another. How do we know how to love God and to love one another? His instructions. So we'll have more videos on this subject. We'll get into Romans and Galatians and all other places. But for now, we know that Jesus is not saying that they're gone. So may Yahweh bless you, and that you will keep studying, and that you will be blessed. Hopefully you'll be blessed by these videos.